I'm going to start with a quotation from Marshall McLuhan to frame our discussion today. The personal and social consequences of any medium result from the new scale that is introduced into our affairs by each extension of ourselves or by any new technology. Control over change would seem to consist in moving not with it, but ahead of it. Anticipation gives the power to deflect and control force. So, getting started with our first question. I would like to talk about process. Because often with technology, we think about the final product. We think about the device, we think about the screens, we think about the things that we can hold. But very often, we don't really understand the process that happens behind these products. And the creative process is so critical and reveals in and of itself how technology is approached within the institution. So I'd like to start with Emma and then go down the line. And just, if you can talk a little bit about how you and your institution approaches this creative process.
How do we make the films for MOCAtv? There's a very broad range of films on MOCAtv. It's a YouTube channel, so therefore it's very democratically available. People can just search for content and find it. First and foremost, the remit of the channel is to create content. I create short-form films which reflect the programming at MOCA. So currently, Mike Kelly, I'm going to just advertise that quickly, is opening this weekend. It's open from Monday the 31st. Huge Mike Kelly retrospective. And I'm creating interviews with close friends and collaborators of Mike Kelly. So that's very much an institutional approach. That's how we make it. How do we do that? How many people are on staff? There's me, the creative director, and then I have an in-house editor who also shoots the films, and he edits them, on site, and then we get all the approvals, we show them to all the right people, and we embed all the images that you need to illustrate what people have been interviewed about. So that's the most basic form of what I do. We create short-form film content, and then we put it out through all our different social media platforms. So we put it on our website, we send it out through Twitter, we do Instagram posts about it, Tumblr posts about it, everything we can do to get people to actually see the content we're making. Broadly, we go broader than that. MOCAtv is an unusual situation within a museum context because it's an official funded by Google channel. And we go broader than the actual content about what's actually going on at MOCA. We do commission. We actually commission. It's almost like a sort of digital gallery, if you like, of that doesn't actually have bricks and mortar. It's MOCA, but for the digital age. So, we've commissioned artworks. We've worked with young, new media. There's lots of different terms, you call them, but, new media works pretty well. We've commissioned young, new media artists to make content, specifically artworks, in the form of video, especially for MOCAtv. So that's another type of content. We have very small budgets, as would curators for exhibitions. So there's lots of different ways we do it, but and these are just short films, anything from between 3 to 10, sometimes a bit longer, 12 minutes. We're trying to be YouTube sensitive, and I'm sure you're all aware, most people say that the YouTube generation has only the attention span of like a minute long. Well, I think we've made a film that was 1.5 minutes long, but most of our films are much longer. We have a lot of messaging to convey. They're very educational films, so. But what we take very seriously is the promotion of those films. We can't just be content with putting a film on moca.org and then hoping people find it. So we promote as much as possible through all the digital sort of platforms, other people's platforms, sharing content.
I divide our use of technology into 3 compartments. So there's the infrastructural technology, which I won't bother you with, which is the servers and the guts that make the museum run, and that's boring, and there's not a lot of process. Mostly we make the decision, and then we implement it, and then we help people understand how it benefits them. Then there's web and digital media, where there's a lot of process, and I think the way I would describe it is, I think as an arts organization, you can spend a lot of time and money trying to stay ahead of the curve in technology, and I think everybody feels that, whatever your line of work happens to be. And rather than chase the next new technology and try to understand it, what we do is we try to write we start with use case scenario. So a use case scenario is a story, and I ask, usually on any given project, a cross-disciplinary team, so educators, curators, marketing folks, and my team will write short anecdotes that describe what we want to have happen for the visitor, and whether that's an online visitor or an in-person visitor. And then from that story, the technical staff can extrapolate what it is that we're trying to do with technology. But the thing about technology, especially if you have access to good programmers, is you can make it do pretty much anything you can think of. It's just a matter of time and money. But often what's lacking is imagination. So we try to start with the imagination and have the technology fit a need that's close to our mission, and then we find the right tool from there. And then the third way that I think we try to think about technology in the context of the art museum is in putting technology as a raw material for the making of art at the disposal of artists and helping with that matchmaking. And there I think it's all process, because I think it's important to us, at least in running the Art and Technology Lab, that there not be a fixation on the finished work of art and needing to have a sure thing, but instead on exposing an artist to emerging technology coming from private corporations and seeing if we can't help that artist get access to material that they otherwise wouldn't, and be able to pursue a type of work that maybe otherwise wouldn't be within reach. So there I think the focus is pretty much entirely process.
I come from a communications perspective, and we also create all the content on the Hammer's website. So as you may or may not know, the Hammer has over 350 videos, almost 200 podcasts, audio files that you can listen to of our public programs, of artist interviews, etc. And I manage the Hammer's communications department very much like a boutique creative agency, like an advertising agency or a media agency of some sort. And technology that we're using today, computer, internet, video, it's just a new tool, right? The printing press was new technology at one point. Radio was new technology for terms of communication at one point. Television was new technology and a means of communication. So within the communications department, we start with the story, like you all do, and we think about, for an exhibition, what are the stories we want to tell? And what are the tools that we have at our disposal to be able to tell them in the best way? And I have been lucky enough to hire, I wouldn't begin to know all the ways to do this. I'm actually too old to know all of these things, but I'm good at hiring younger people that can help me even know the newest and best ways. And all of this is changing so quickly that they're just tools. And they're not tools that are really any different than the printing press was in its own day. And it always ends up being about the story. You can use a printing press to tell a really bad story, and it's a terrible story and no one cares. But you can use technology to tell a really great story, and then there's meaning, and there's substance, and there's education, and it enriches your experience at the museum, or it just enriches your Thursday evening. So it's really about that, and that's how we approach it, and that's how we think of the process in terms of what kind of story do we want to tell, and which of the tools that we have at our disposal are the best ways to tell that story to the most amount of people.
I'd like to talk a bit about the old stalwart, the website. As we talk about social media and ever emerging new channels and more social media and social apps and networks, what remains is always the website. And I think there was a Pew report that said 97% of arts organizations have websites. That's pretty amazing. And I'd like to talk a bit about what role the website plays now within this big picture, and has this role changed and evolved, and what is the relationship of the museum's online presence to its bricks and mortar presence. Another fear which is still so prevalent today in the arts world is that you put too much information on the website, and then will people ever want to come to the museum? So if we can talk a little bit about the website and how you all approach the website within your projects.
The most important, of course, is information. You know, most people going there want to know where to park, you know, what's on, how, you know, when not to come, you know, all the very most basic information. You know, there's other ways that this information is also going to be easily accessible on apps, on, you know, push technology where you walk past a museum and it tells you, literally tells you when it's open or what's showing. But the fact is that, you know, a museum has to appeal to a very broad age range, a very broad, you know, way that people communicate, and a website is, to my mind, it's not my chosen, it's not my specialized field, but of course it's always going to be important. It's not the place where you constantly have to renew information, so you use other social media, other sites to be more frequent, more fluid, like I say, you know, Twitter or other places. Those reach different audiences and they have a different sort of frequency.
And so the calendar section is a really big deal. We have an interactive calendar section that has, on average, about 30 public programs a day. And then a really important component of our site is that we give images away of artworks that we believe to be in the public domain online. So you can download I would say it's not quite publication quality, it's probably more like really good PowerPoint quality. But anyway, pretty good, without any restrictions on use, and we do that for over 20,000 works that are in the collection. And we were the first museum to do that, and it serves many purposes for us, but it started with a conversation that we had with LA public school teachers. We had been putting out curriculum materials online for a while, and we said, how useful are these curriculum materials? And they said, what we really want, if you really want to get art into the classroom, is we need free access to images. So obviously things that are under artist copyright, we can't do that for. And in a similar vein, we started to make digital versions of out-of-print publications available for free in our reading room. And we also actually commission artist projects that live only online and use the website in that way too. So it has this sort of practical purpose for selling tickets and telling people what's on view and what time we open, but there's also a life that the institution has online that's different from what goes on inside the walls of the museum. And I make that point a lot. So we refer to our online visitors as virtual visitors. We get 1 million visitors through the door every year, and we reach about 5 million people a year online. And those other 4 million people aren't thinking about coming, and then they don't show up. They're doing something else. They're reading a book, or they're accessing free images, or they're doing research, or any number of other things that we try to support on the web.
The website is really the public face of the museum in a lot of ways. I mean, it is the primary place that represents us as an institution. Like you, at least twice as many people visit us online than actually visit us in person. And we are an organization that believes that people should have access to all that we do. As you might know, we recently got rid of admission, and all of our public programs have always been free. And we also videotape all of our public programs, or at least most of them, and put them on our website. And they've been sort of buried, and the new website will highlight it more. But part of our website, too, is to try to provide a dynamic experience that's similar to that of actually the brick and mortar. That it's a place that you can come for content, and rich content. You can come and see an artist interview. If you missed that reading by Joan Didion last week, you can come back to our website and watch it while you're having your coffee one morning. And making all of that available for free to as many people as we can.
Emma mentioned a bit about resources, and I'd like to talk about resources because when you're talking about whether it's websites or any technological projects, one of the biggest hurdles is always lack of resources, and that can be staff or money. And technology would be easier to sell to the administration if you could promise hard returns, whether it's increased revenue or increased attendance or membership. So how do we monetize technology? Do we want to monetize technology? Do we want to convert our virtual visitors into physical ticket buyers and members?
Well, I mean, anything that we do, we want to create an atmosphere, that will entice people down to the museum, to create a culture, that ends up adding to the footfall and people visiting the exhibitions. Of course, that's a primary goal for any institution. I'm sure we'd all admit to that. But at the same time, a lot of what's being done, as you say, is people aren't ever going to come because they're not even anywhere near us. It's a global communication strategy, so having people, it is just as relevant to have people experience the museum. And this is a debate that's going through all museums, how to actually accept that and not be about physical footfall and people coming. How do we sort of really cater to an audience that will never come to Los Angeles? I have, a lot of content which essentially might potentially be monetized because I might have a different distribution network for my content. So a little bit working like I'm in the entertainment industry. I'm creating films that could be syndicatable. I could, sell them, if you like, to disseminate them on other platforms, use them. It's a bit like being a TV production company or something.
I think the question that you're asking is really, are we trying to monetize the content that we share through digital channels? And the answer at LACMA is no, we are not. And that's a very explicit decision that we took very deliberately. So I think, we do all kinds of things on using technology. We run fundraising campaigns for public programs using text messaging and, do that kind of thing. We sell tickets, but to the extent that some institutions are making a decision now about should they monetize content or not, we made the decision that no, we would not, that it was mission critical and that sharing publications online, sharing images online, all of that, our apps are all free. We have an explicit mandate that we do not ever charge for content. It's part of our educational mission.
The same is true at the Hammer, and I would actually say that this is begrudging to development departments and fundraisers all over, because I think that fundraisers see in institutions across the country, I think this is an institutional conversation that's not just happening here in Los Angeles, that this is something that's happening nationally, internationally, and certainly the fundraisers and the development department would see this content that institutions are creating and putting on the website, and can't we just make it special for members? They have to become a member to get access to this. And it's a real debate, and philosophically, much to the chagrin, as I said, of our development department, the Hammer is against that. We just eliminated admission, so if we're going to allow you to come to the museum for free, then it doesn't seem to make any sense for us to try to charge you to use the content online.
I'd like to add that I think that ultimately the world doesn't expect to pay for content. So whether or not we all wanted to sell it, no one would pay for it. That's just, it's almost like it's flown the coop. It never happened.
We're hearing a really important distinction here, and the distinction is that technology and technology projects can be funded. They're fundable. They can be funded by grants and by sponsorships. And I think it's important to start thinking of them as projects in the same way that we've thought about projects in the past that are fundable. But when we do think about content, it is the trend, and we are seeing museums starting to be more comfortable with opening up. And this is also really important because people are expecting to go on the web and find this content and to find it free, and not just to find little bitty thumbnails, but to find great quality that can be shared. So I would like to talk a little bit about this opening up of the museum, because institutions are often afraid that when they open up, they lose control. And there's very ways that they can lose control. And a lot of it is with social media. What are people going to say about my institution? A lot about it is with crowdsourced curating and digital comment books. And it requires a lot of upkeep and a lot of constant watching. So maybe you can all talk about how you maintain that balance between opening up and being a more democratic museum, and how you retain the authority and the expertise that we all come to expect from museums.
most people experience the world now through taking photos, through sharing, through Instagram, through, oh, I haven't really experienced it unless I do a selfie, with it. And then it became apparent that it hadn't really occurred to me. I don't really do it myself, but museums, there's a big problem with, the rights, image rights for artwork. So, whereas exhibitions should constantly that's the way that the world experiences things. So, that's almost a problem. There's a big attitude change, and people are debating whether or not, everything should be, everyone should be able to just photograph everything in museums, and that's something that I think is there's a really diverse, I'm understanding, because you know this world better than me, that there's such a range of attitudes to that, and it hasn't leveled off, and there's people under a lot of pressure to make it possible for everyone just to take photographs. And so that's another opening up attitude, which, we're going through now at MOCA. We're not actually, to this point now, we're not actually sure whether people will be able to take photos at the Mike Kelly exhibition from Monday onwards. We're not sure yet. So that's something which I find really fascinating, really to be in this world of communication and to harness that communication, because the more people who, send out images of themselves, to all their friends, that's a network. That's essentially a really good promotional tool for the exhibition.
How do you open up to this new world of social media and this sort of perpetual multi-channel conversation that's happening, and at the same time make space for the curatorial narrative or the expert narrative? And I don't think it's actually that hard. I remember at an earlier phase of my career, there was a lot of anxiety that if you let people talk about the art, they weren't going to listen to what we had to share with them. That hasn't really happened. I think it just sort of evaporated, that anxiety. Because really what we find is if people are talking to each other about the art, they get more interested in hearing what somebody who's been working with that artist for 20, 30 years has to say about it, or why they chose to hang this piece next to that piece. And MOCAtv is a brilliant example of, then you have the opportunity to use the web and use video to tell that story. So I think all three of us in our own way probably see our job as telling those expert stories in an interesting way, whether that expert is the artist or the curator or a writer who's come in to do a public program or whatever. And they're not really competing for space with the social media conversation. I think they can be complementary sort of, but different streams of the same kind of energy around a topic or an exhibition or an artist.
The Hammer was sort of late to the game on digital stuff and in a lot of ways, and we've really only been doing hardcore social media pushes for about 2 years. And since that time, though, we've seen about a 35% increase in attendance. And it's in part because probably we've had some really cool shows up, and there's been more press, and there are a lot of factors to that. But I do think that this sort of social media conversation that we start, that people pick up on, actually does drive traffic. At least the people that are local, because if someone shares it, people start finding out about the Hammer that never knew about the Hammer. So I think that this opening up is a way for us, on one hand, to just promote ourselves in a kind of way, to be honest, but to promote ourselves in I have a theory about communication, which is that everybody's so used to being spun to and marketed to right now that authenticity, like if you can figure out what your voice really is and what your message really is, and then you just talk about that in a really real way, it is incredibly effective, because people, they want to hear interesting things. This is a way for us to do just that. And we don't have to spin anything, and it doesn't have to be too glitzy, and it can just be really real. So I think that opening up is a way to do that.
You talk about promotion and marketing and all these kind of dirty words, but it really is about storytelling and engaging and communicating.
And community outreach. I mean, most of these people aren't going to become members. We're communicating with them because we think we do really cool stuff at the Hammer, and we just want more people to come check it out. having some, we're not going to get an admission ticket. Like there's, we're telling you about it because it's really cool, and if you don't know about it, you should come check it out, sort of thing. So in that way, it's a different kind of message.
I just wanted to add that it's, there isn't this, none of this is empirical. We're all finding our way with it. Now, MOCA is a small group of us who are questioning what the voice of, you were saying, what the voice of the Hammer is. What is the voice of MOCA? We're not sure yet. We don't, I put out YouTube videos and I get comments. And there's comments. And should MOCAtv go in and go, actually, that's not quite what we would, we haven't done it yet. We actually, we haven't decided whether we should, we haven't stepped into toe in the water yet. And we don't know, we don't have, there's a director of the PS1 MoMA, Klaus Biesenbach, who's constantly communicating with the outside world in the most unfiltered way. And you sort of wonder, whoa, is anyone monitoring that? And then you've got Nicholas Sirota, and I'm sure you know very well that he writes amazing papers on digital communications. And the last one I read, he said everybody at the museum should be communicating and promoting the museum. So it's like, where do we go with this? We're still analyzing. It's almost like we're in a new phase. We're not quite sure. We don't know whether Philippe Verne wants to get on Twitter and start addressing an audience. What I'm really saying is that, just because it's a museum, and I'm relatively new to this world, there's no set rules. It's like an individual. You all can decide whether or not you are going to be really active on social media and constantly post pictures of your grandchildren or not. It's the same for us in a way. We have to kind of figure it out. And we haven't quite stepped in fully yet, to be honest, as a museum. It'll come, but we haven't decided how much to do. Because the worst thing is if you start something up, and then you just go, I can't be bothered anymore. It's got to be consistent. You've got to develop your audience. You've got to grow it. You've got to be able to cope with it. You've got to have the staff to do it, and the consistent voice. And it's a conundrum, always.
Thank you so much.